What is the fallout for that? What's the
Well,
damage that causes?
for me, I mean, most of you people know my story. I mean, I had addictions and, things I did in the dark, and, there was damage to my family too. Not just because of what I was doing in the dark, but also because I was married to my work, and I wasn't, getting filled up. So I was giving, you know, not giving in a way that was of a place of abundance. It was a place of lack. And so, you kind of give whatever's left over, to your family or even to those that you're trying to lead. Um, and I would have these, I don't know, think about it this way. It's like you're so starving that you forget you're hungry,
Hmm.
you know, and then you go to something like a youth conference that we took kids to when I was a youth pastor, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And then you go home.
Yeah. Well, hey, good evening, allies and friends. Thanks for joining us for another Recalibrate here on Zoweh. Whether you're watching this on YouTube or you're joining us live on Zoom, really excited to have you here. Recalibrate is our monthly conversation centered around really equipping and engaging men who are fighting for and establishing redemptive communities everywhere around them. So, really excited about that. I'm joined by our allies director and co-host of Recalibrate, Mr. Greg Sailors. What's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, hey, Josh, so good to be with you, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. Hey, everybody, so glad you're with us on YouTube, Facebook, here on Zoom. What an honor to be with such fun men, particularly here in December when it's hard to gather folks. We got a lot of folks off doing their family thing, and we certainly understand. So if you're watching at a later date, welcome.
Yeah, we do this the third Thursday of every single month right here, 8 o'clock p.m. You can always find us going to zoe.org/allies/ recalibrate. And tonight we're going to be talking about something, Greg, that we've been talking about for a long time. But we get
Yeah.
to really start turning the page, if you will, and going into some of the conversation that is battle plan. So I know that's super near and dear to your heart, man. So why don't you kick us off and just kind of set the table for where we're going tonight?
Yeah, so we've been talking about battle plan a lot in reference to your small group or the group that you might want to create. Some of you might know that myself and Jim Shanae and our team at Allies, we've been putting on something that we call an Allies workshop, a battle plan workshop, and we've done a few of those now, and we have some coming up. So if it's still December or early January when you watch this, you can go to zoe.org/events and join us in Western North Carolina for an Allies Battle Plan workshop there in January. But if you're watching now, hey, we want to really kind of focus in away from the idea of a large group battle plan, really, and move toward what does it look like to have a personal battle plan for your heart. And Josh, I don't know about you, but I remember my early years of ministry. You and I both church ministry, different times, separated by a decade or plus. So where did you, when you started thinking about doing ministry, doing youth ministry, did you have any inkling of, hey, I probably should have a path to restoration or a battle plan for my own personal development? Was that in your vocabulary at all?
Yeah, no, not at all, man. And I was pretty young. I was 20 when I took my first position, like official position, not volunteer, my official position. And I already kind of had the blinders on of I'm just running full speed, man. I'm going hard at this every second. I'm giving to this. And I would say that the leadership around me did a really good job of putting things around me to equip me for the job, but not really any effort in equipping my heart. So yeah, I wasn't thinking about it, and no one else around me really brought it up, man. That's
Yeah.
actually how I found Zoe. was looking for something like that, to be honest with you.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I mean, man, I tell you what, that was me. That's my story too. I'm thrown right to the wolves. Church folks that might be with us or watching later, it felt like that. The wolves of life, the wolves of um, pastoral committees, and I'm 21 years old, and uh, I never had anybody tell me that it might be good if you had a plan for your life. The Lord has a plan for our life, right? To give us a future and a hope. He talks about that. Well, how do you come in alignment with that when you really don't have anybody that's ever told you that it might be good if you have a battle plan or some kind of path, some kind of desire and help and to move in a direction, you know, and I didn't have it either.
no. No, man, and it's so funny, right? If you look around in the professional space, obviously we talk a lot about the athletic space, man. There's years of preparation. Think of a kid, think of a hot shot prospect. The best prospects in baseball don't go straight from where they're drafted from into the pro organization, right? They don't.
Right.
Even the number one blue chip prospect doesn't football either. And so it's just interesting, man. It's interesting, right? How for ministry that doesn't, and not just church, just ministry in general. I think, man, right? It's interesting to me that the effort and the focus is about pouring out more than getting poured. There's not a balance there if to get poured in and go after your own heart, your own soul care.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so my question for you then, Greg, is we both share that. I know there's guys watching this that share that too. What is the fallout for that? What's the
Well,
damage that causes?
for me, I mean, most of you people know my story. I mean, I had addictions and, things I did in the dark, and, there was damage to my family too. Not just because of what I was doing in the dark, but also because I was married to my work, and I wasn't, getting filled up. So I was giving, you know, not giving in a way that was of a place of abundance. It was a place of lack. And so, you kind of give whatever's left over, to your family or even to those that you're trying to lead. Um, and I would have these, I don't know, think about it this way. It's like you're so starving that you forget you're hungry,
Hmm.
you know, and then you go to something like a youth conference that we took kids to when I was a youth pastor, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And then you go home.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you ever experienced that?
Oh yeah, the mountaintop experience, man, and how we even talk about this in the context of Zoweh, right, guys? Is man, the weekends are so special, and really truly, we say all the time, we believe the heart of a man can change in a weekend. Well, I saw that in youth ministry too, both as a youth pastor and a youth myself, attending these weekends, these special moments where you get a glimpse, you get a taste. Really, what I think you get a glimpse and a taste of is what God intends and wants for us on a day to day basis.
Right.
And so, what I think about Greg in the sense of the fallout for me was in 2015. I'm running, 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 running. I'm answering every call. I'm showing up to every game. I'm sitting at every table. I'm staying out late after service talking. I'm at the altar. I mean, I'm pouring out everything, right? And then it all abruptly ended.
Yeah.
It all abruptly, and then to see that kind of cycle back again. Some of you guys know me planting my church. I've shared about it at the weekend. We planted a year before COVID. It didn't make it. Again, I spent 3 years pouring everything, literally everything into that, and then it went away. It reminds me of this quote that you say all the time from Mike Tyson: everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And bro, those were punches in the mouth, in the gut, between the legs, blindsided. I felt it all, and I know you guys have too, Gary. I know you have. We've talked about it, and yeah, you better have a battle plan, right, for yourself because of what the enemy can do, the diminishment that comes for you, the shame that comes for you, the doubt, the questions, and so yeah, man. What happens when a man gets punched in the mouth? Why, and how can the battle plan help with that?
Well, you need to have a plan for when you do get punched in the mouth. You got to have a battle plan in general, and then when the battle plan doesn't work, you got to have a battle plan for when it doesn't work. You know,
Yes. Yeah.
what's your fallback when it doesn't work? Because inevitably, when you step on the field of battle, all the battle plans get thrown out the window. And there's a quote in my battle plan in the battle plan we're writing that says that it's like, you step on the field of battle, and then suddenly everything that you thought that was going to work, it don't work no more. So now what? And so you got to have that battle plan as well. The enemy, he has such a plan for your life, right?
Yeah.
We love to say, hey, the Lord loves us and he has a plan for our life to give us a future and a hope. Well, the enemy has a plan too. He's well aware of what could happen when men like you have your own personal battle plan. You get oriented, you begin to really experience the identity as a beloved son. You get this healing in life and move from a place of, false self dominant to true self dominant. And he knows what that kind of direction can produce, and he fears it, and he fears all of you.
Yeah.
Um,
It's good.
Josh, I want to know, I want to talk a minute, both of us, about kind of that burning bush oriented moment, whether we knew we were stepping on to a path of restoration, um, or we had a personal battle plan or not. This is even after salvation for both of us, I know.
Yeah.
But what was that kind of, um, you know, moment where you had that burning bush moment and you kind of started moving in a direction? And there's an interesting story with the Jennings and you and the bridge and Goldsboro, and I'd love for the guys to
Yeah.
hear this.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. I'll try to sum this up pretty quick. Because it's really as it is, right? It's layers. There's layers that I went through in 2012, 2013 that prepared me for what I went through in 2015, 2016, that prepared me for what I went through in 2019, 2020 into just this past weekend. But that timeline is, yeah, man, I was green in ministry, as I mentioned, going full bore, freshly married, brand new baby girl, then got pregnant with my first son, and life happened quick. And so like I said, I went looking for something, but not knowing really what I was even looking for. Scott Jennings, S.J. Jennings, was on staff at the same church I was, had been talking about this thing called Top Gun for months. Top Gun, Top Gun, Top Gun, which was used to be the Heart of a Warrior weekend, for those of you who may not know. And I just was like, I'm not interested, man. I'm not interested in going. I think I even said, I'm not even interested in going up on the mountain with a bunch of dudes crying, man. Like, I'm not, no thanks. And man, they were circling up outside the church, 40 plus men, Greg, and maybe 50. And they were getting ready to load the vans. And I just felt the Spirit of God tell me I needed to go. I called my wife, who was home with again, newborn baby girl. Yep, you need to go. You should go. So I'm thankful for that. I literally left, packed my bag, got in the van, and showed up to Top Gun. As I said, layers and layers and layers and layers. I think I'll just kind of sum it up and just say is I got there, I got to that weekend, and I've been to maybe 5 or 6 more since that initial weekend. And yeah, man, I think those weekends just showed me how hard I was working for everyone else and how little effort and time I was putting into my own heart and soul.
Right.
And guys, you guys know this, guys, those of you that lead groups and lead ministries and even just lead your family, lead yourself, things go well. You don't even think about the plan, right? Until you get punched in the mouth. And I got punched so hard in 2019, 2020 rather, that our church closed at the end of 21. Excuse me, at the end of 2020. This past weekend was the first time I stepped foot back in church. Unless I was invited to preach occasionally a couple times, it was the first time I stepped foot back in church. And guess what? The church we went to was a portable church, just like ours was. They had a service. I mean, it literally felt like our church. I mean, it was one of those, like, it was kind of an out of body experience. But I say that to just say that I'm a dude that loved the Lord for most of my life, gave the last 15 years of my life to serve him and do whatever he wanted me to do. and then still got blindsided by some things. And it put everything I said, everything I preached, everything I wrote down in my journals, it put all of it to the test, man. And yeah, I think but in some of those moments, Greg, I didn't even realize what I was looking for. I was just hungry and thirsty for something. And this past Sunday, and God has so done these gentle nudges and calling me into moments like he does all throughout scripture, where he just reminds me, man. He just reminds me of how good he is. And just brought some really cool healing moments for me. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of in a nutshell, without taking up the rest of the Zoom call. Those are some of the monument moments for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you find yourself on this path to restoration without saying, I'm going to take a right up here at exit 142, and that's the path to restoration, and I'm
Right.
going to be on that. It's just like, because God is so amazing in the way that He pursues us, and I think turning into Him and making that choice of hearing God and saying, "Hey, I'm going to go on this thing. Let me make sure it's all right at home." And you did your great due diligence there, and you got that blessing, and
Yeah.
hey, off you go. And I'm so glad you did, for
Well,
sure.
you got this quote. I just want to read this little passage from the battle plan, guys, or at least the workshop, because this is in a nutshell what we're talking about, right, Greg? It's not as black and white as we would think it is. It's not as black and white. Like I think of, this is not the quote. This is me, but I think of like the sport. We're watching the World Cup. We're watching football. We talk about it in the office all the time. Okay, these teams know they're playing each other. They're spending a week strategizing and scheming. They show up to an agreed place. They play a set amount of time. There's referees. There's boundaries. Okay, in life, it's not like that, right? We so often those attacks and things that happen to us are out of nowhere. It's underneath something we didn't even expect it to be there. It's a landmine waiting. And so I think of, I'll read the quote now from page 3, Greg. Our enemy knows the value of a man fully alive and is hell bent against seeing men come alive. Like, bro, like it's either opposing you coming alive or it's doing everything it can to suffocate you once you do, right?
Yeah.
To diminish that. He is the accuser of brethren. Revelation 12:10. This is the reason there are so few effective and impactful men's ministries. It is violently opposed, right? And then you go down and you share the quote from John Eldridge. The story of your life is the story of the long and brutal assault on your heart by the one who knows what you could be and fears it. Why did you put that in there, man? Why did you bring that up?
Well, for me, and to go into my story a little bit, to bring it to where we are, to answer your question, I in church ministry like you, two different churches for about 5 years, and um, found myself even in the midst of all that in addiction, with marriage in trouble, and all those types of things, and just kind of floating, trying to make my way through life, and uh, ministry, and a buck, try to be able to fight for the family, and taken completely out the whole time.
Yeah.
Literally almost like I'm sleepwalking through it all, kind of finding my way, and you get hit and you get hit, and you're just like, you're just dazed and confused. But you're still moving forward to some degree, but you're dazed and confused, and you realize that there's this veil that's been kind of pulled over your eyes, or these scales, and it takes those moments, like running after the van that's leaving to go to Goshen, the Top Gun for you, and being there in Goldsboro. And for me, it was a guy that his name's Eric Peters, and he's a Christian artist and friend of mine, and came into my office there in Georgia and saw Wild at Heart on my shelf, and he pulls it off the shelf, and he opens it up, and he's like, breaking it over his knee because it's so stiff. It's like I've never read it, right? And he says, "Hey, what do you think about this book?" And I'm like, "Oh man, it's so good. It's the best book." He's like, "Really? Okay. Well, what do you think about the wound section?" Again, he's like breaking it over his knee, and I'm like, "Oh, at least I've read chapter headings a little bit. I'm like, yeah, everybody's wounded, and he kind of slams it, right? Puts it back on the shelf. He's like, oh, okay. Well, doesn't look like you read this book to me. Mic drop,
Yeah, sure.
And no, okay. So the next day, I called my friend that gave me the book back in Shelby. I'm in Georgia at the time. I'm like, why do I need to read? I mean, seriously, this blankety blank book. He's like, you hadn't read it yet? I'm like, no, I haven't read it. The story of your life is the story of a long and brutal assault on your heart by the one who knows what you could be and he fears it. I mean, I hadn't had any smelling salts yet,
Yeah,
really, until that moment. And, get some smelling salts and begin to kind of wait a minute,
yeah,
there's more.
yeah,
That's why exploring more, right? There's more life and more love and more freedom. And the things that are going on in the dark, I can have freedom to that.
yeah,
You know what?
yeah,
And so why don't you come? And then I went to a boot camp. First, this particular boot camp called Heroes. This was not Zoweh, another one like a Heart of Warrior encounter, and then went out to for years out to see Eldridge and those guys. And again, like I said earlier, it's like I didn't know I was on a path to restoration, or I wasn't saying I was on a path to restoration. I wasn't saying I had a battle plan, but all I knew is those folks had water, and I was thirsty, and I was going to where the water was.
yeah,
That was as much as I could say it was a battle plan.
yeah,
That's all I had. That was it. And I think about, what's going on at Zoweh right now. It's the end of the year. A lot of you guys probably have got end of year emails or packets from us. Our whole, push at this end of the year is called ending isolation, because we see and experience so many people that are living lives of quiet desperation, like Thoreau says, right?
yeah, yeah,
And going to the grave with a song still in them. I mean, because our enemy knows their value and he's accusing them and they're living those lives.
yeah,
So, hey, I mean, we've talked about it. We know that we need this. We know that the enemy's after us. That most men's ministries they kind of don't do that. They don't give us that path, and we're not pointing fingers and saying churches are wrong or you guys are wrong. It just doesn't happen. It's not a part of life. And
mm,
some people kind of get it, Josh, but a lot of people don't.
no, no,
And so, what can we do for all those folks that are alone? And some of you guys right now are saying, "Hey, I'm in with that. I'm alone too." Right? And I'm telling you, it all starts. It really does start right here. And there's salvation, yes, Josh, but there's something that we say a lot. It's called getting your heart back,
yeah.
being back to life.
I was just gonna say, man, I've been talking to the team a little bit about this. Have you guys watched the Obi-Wan Kenobi series on Disney Plus? Man, I don't know if there's a better story out right now that's come out over the past year that walks through that redemptive storyline. And even if you're not a big Star Wars guy, that's okay. I would say you need a little bit of context, but if you just go watch the trailer, this is one of the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy, right? And has in his entire order, his entire value system fail him, loses his best friend, everything he stands for loses, and what it causes him to do is to retreat and to hide, right, Greg? Gives up, he buries his sword, buries his lightsaber, and takes up a false name. Don't even call me by Obi-Wan, call me Ben. And I won't spoil the series if you haven't seen it, but my goodness, man, that path. So I say that to say, as I even think through it, I remember hearing that. I remember that's SJ said, you need to get your heart back. And my
Yeah.
response was, I've got my heart. Almost like if you guys have heard the Robin and Michael story, like almost like I'm fine, thank you, I'm good.
Right.
And even going to the weekend, I don't understand. My heart's not good. What do you mean? Until it's
Right.
not. And then what do you do? And then how do you get your heart back? So I compare it to what that series, I compare to what I've done. And Gray, maybe you can share a little bit too about what that looks like. But mean, acknowledgement is a good place to start. Awareness is a good place to start, but I think a lot of men stop there. So, yeah,
Yeah.
Greg, talk to us a little bit about that, man. What does that taking those first few steps on the path? What are some of the
Well,
first few mile markers you would say?
well, I love the scripture about making all things new, right? Jesus said, I'm going to make all things new, not one thing new, not two things new or a few things new. I'm making all things new, right? So when I understand that it's not insurmountable, because a lot of times when you think about your story, and Greg, I've heard this many times, people say, hey, Greg, you don't know what I've done. You don't know how hard things are. It's just too much, you know? And so they live in that space. My father-in-law, who's been passed away now for several years, over the years, talking to him about faith and his faith journey, and the things that happened to him, he would say, "Hey, it's too late for me." Right? I mean, since we're talking about Star Wars, right?
Right, right.
Uh, I think about Anakin, and him saying, "It's too late for me, son," or whatever,
Yeah,
and Luke's like, "No, it's not. We got this."
yeah, yeah,
And there and so anyway, it's not too late, and I think a part of getting to this threshold of this path to restoration is realizing you've been on it for a long time, because God's been pursuing and loving you so doggone much all these years, because you're already on the path. It's just like you got to wake up to it and look down and see that your feet's on this path, and you're like, oh my gosh, we're going, and God's going with us, because we are on a comeback
yeah.
all the time. And so, this quote from this book called The Heart of a Warrior by this obscure author called Michael Thompson. It says there at the end of chapter 2, recovering your heart will take time, just as the wounds it received came over time. So it's healing and restoration. It typically takes 2 to 3 years for a man to truly get his heart back, if that man walks with God. And I would add, and I've told Michael that in the Greg edition, we'll say, if he walks with God and a group of fine men like you guys, allies groups, band of brothers. Yeah, it'll take some time to get his heart back, if he stays the course. The question often is, how earnestly do you want what you seek? How badly do you want your heart back? How free do you want to be? It's in the healing of a man's heart that the greatest training takes place. Much is at stake, more than you know. Seeking to reclaim your heart is your first step in fighting for the many hearts of others. Remembering your story is part of the larger story. You are needed. And so, yeah, guys, we got to wake up to that we're in this larger story, and that we have an opportunity. And if we want to fight for the hearts of others, we have to be on a path to restoration. We've got to be moving in the right direction. You ain't got to have it all together, Josh,
Right.
but you got to have this life of healing, and be moving towards healing. So, yeah, I just love for you to respond to that for a second, as we're going to land the plane here in about 10 minutes or so, or less.
Yeah, and I wanted to drop this in here real quick. I just dropped it in chat for you guys to go check out that trailer when you get a chance. And yeah, man, I just looking at that, I remember hearing, Greg, that it was gonna take 2 to 3 years. Again, I came into this pretty comfortable in my Christianity and pretty skeptical of everything I heard that weekend. I don't know if anyone else relates to that. My Christianity was just fine, pretty skeptical about all this heart stuff. Um, and man, in my personal life, again, I think I alluded to it. It was 2012 was the first weekend I went to, guys, and 2 to 3 years, and then 2015 was a landmine going off, and then it took me 2 or 3 years to work through that. You know what I mean? And so there is some validity to that, because I think just to break it down in a more practical sense, Greg, um, for a lot of our emotional journey, spiritual journey is obviously equated to that. Um, we just graze past it, man. It's like driving on the interstate at 80 miles an hour. Whatever you're looking at on the side of the road looks much different when you're going 40 miles an hour.
Right.
It looks much different when you're walking the speed of Jesus, which is about 3 miles an hour. So when a man actually slows down to look around and look in, okay, well, if I'm not looking at the road, I'm not going to be driving 80 miles an hour. I'm going to slow down. Again, it looks much different. And so it does take time just by the nature of the time that you're taking to actually reflect, respond, walk with God in those moments. Um, and layers upon layers, man. So yeah.
Yeah, that's good, Josh. Let's talk for a minute here as we're landing the plane about what are some practical ways to be on the path to restoration, to, some action steps, to moving towards healing
Yeah.
and things like that. I mean, I've got a few really easy ones. One is, I mean, reading books like The Heart of a Warrior. We got King Me coming out really soon, Josh.
Yeah.
Waking the Dead by Eldridge is awesome. Obviously, Wild at Heart. Beautiful Outlaw. If you don't got Jesus right, that's problematic. So reading Beautiful Outlaw, larger story stuff like Search and Rescue and Epic by Eldridge. There's a lot of great resources, Gary Barkalow and It's Your Call. So out there for you to read. So that's one thing, right? And we've talked about the weekends, obviously. So let's talk a little bit about that, Josh. I mean, that probably for me, even though that time when Eric came into my office and saw Wild at Heart on the shelf was a big smelling salts for me. But man, when I really got thirsty was at the weekends.
Yeah. Taste and see, right? I mean, I use this story all the time. My dad and my grandpa grew up lifelong bleed Tar Heel blue blood. I ain't okay. I mean, and just every game, name every player. Dean Smith is on the Mount Rushmore of most important people in their life. Okay. It was serious. We live an hour and 15 minutes from Chapel Hill. Guess how many games they went to?
I'm gonna bet zero, right?
Zero. I took my dad to his first game, which was a really cool moment for me for a lot of reasons. But I just could not fathom this man has been a Tar Heel fan for 50 years and would not drive an hour down the road to experience the Dean Dome. And it changed, and he began to say things like, "I cannot believe I waited this long. I cannot believe I've never been here. This is incredible." This, just using all kinds of really descriptive language like that. It changed everything. And so yeah, that's what I equate it to, Greg. You can read about it or you can go experience it. The world is not in your books and maps, right, Mister Baggins? It's out there. And so yeah, that's how I would describe it for sure.
Yeah, and obviously plugging our events, Zoweh.org/events. But a lot of you all have events and you all have venues and things like that. Zoweh Allies is a very kingdom oriented ministry, as you all know. And so we love that. You can go to our Frontlines network where many of you have your groups there and you have your events that you do. So we love that and we love the work and the good that God's up to through each of you. So yeah, so I think step one, I mean, read the book, listen to it on audio, because I know a lot of y'all say you read, but you don't really. I know who you are, so listen to it. Great podcast out there, right? Exploring more. I mean, you know a lot about different podcasts. There's great podcasts. We love, for example, Graham Cook. Graham Cook is amazing. He will help you understand your heart and your identity. That's a great place to go on your path to restoration. One of the things that we do with our friends last month, we had Chris Hartenstein on here from the New Frontiers, and at the New Frontiers, we create a battle plan there that's personal for fathers and sons. And you write stuff out like, hey, these are the top 3 people in my life that I know that I can trust, for example, and I'm going to intentionally spend time with them over the next year, every quarter. That's part of the battle plan. It might be too that, hey, here's 2 things that I identify in my life that are really causing me problems. Like, I really don't know why I'm angry with my wife all the time, or I don't understand why I have such a hard time with what's going on in the dark. I don't understand. So I'm going to go get counseling. That's a part of the battle plan, for example, that your own personal battle plan. It might be that, I really want to learn how to play a guitar. Well, if you're going to learn how to play a guitar, what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to put some time in, Josh. You know,
Yep.
you might have to find a teacher. Well, the same thing with this. It might be that you need a guide to help you through whatever it is that you're going through,
Yeah.
or to become the person God's designed you to be, or the thing that you want. Like if you want to, learn how to lead small groups, you're at a great place tonight. We're talking about it here, and we have a different, we have a library of recalibrates that you can go back and watch and listen to that will help you to do that well, Josh. What about you? What's a step or two you might would add to that list?
Yeah, and don't do it alone. Right. I mean, I know so much of what you guys do is about other men. And you're telling them the same thing. And again, it's back to full circle what we began this conversation with. So often the leaders are the ones who are alone. Don't do it alone. And if you don't feel, at least through some of this deep work, that your group of guys that you're leading is your group of guys to do that with, then talk to Greg and I and let us help you find some guys that you can do that with. Because I get it. That's kind of some tough waters to wade at the beginning, right? And it's just so important. And I say that because so many of my pastor friends, that's their excuse. Well, I can't be real with the men in my church. I don't know if that's true or not, but if that's how you feel, that's going to be a roadblock, right, between you and going after your restoration. So let us help you. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, we really are. I love that, Josh, and we're honored to be able to have those types of conversations, and quite honestly, probably have that conversation about more than anything else. When it comes to our allies groups, it's not about here's the 10 things you need to do to make sure you have a successful allies group. It's a lot of you guys we're friends with, and you guys know it's the truth. I say, hey, I love you. It's the truth. I'd love to talk to you, and we do talk because I do want to be your friend. And many times we're talking about stuff. I'm telling you, like, what can I pray about? And you tell me, and we pray. And then very often you say, hey, what can I pray for you about? And just think about that. It's those type of interpersonal, intimate relationships, and that's what all this is built on. So built on that belovedness, that love, and that's where we're going with those types of friendships, Josh.
That's right. Yeah, well, hey guys, we want to thank you so much for joining us. As always, you can find us here, Recalibrate, third Thursday of every single month. Everything we've talked about here tonight simply can be found at www.zoweh.org. And we will see you guys next month.